There is a kind of inner strength that does not break, bend, or compromise. The samurai of ancient Japan learned how to build this strength within themselves. You've probably heard stories about the samurai, how disciplined, resilient, and courageous they were, and most importantly, how they possessed a will that could not be shaken. The Japanese have a term for this, Hagane no Ishi, the will of steel. But here's something many people overlook. Hagane no Ishi is not something you're simply born with. It is developed. Just like steel is shaped, heated, hammered, cooled, and refined over and over again, this will is formed through deliberate effort. For centuries, the samurai refined this process. They called it Bushido, the way of the warrior, and it was not only about combat. It was about shaping a spirit that could not be broken, by fear, by pain, or even by the thought of death. The will and the spirit are closely connected. When someone has a weak spirit, their will collapses quickly. They give up at the first difficulty. But when a person builds a strong spirit, they endure. They keep going to the last drop of effort, to the final moment, no matter how challenging the path becomes. Today, you're going to understand how the samurai developed this level of inner strength. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment. I will build a will of steel. This simple action shows your commitment to your own growth and also supports the work that goes into bringing more content like this. And to everyone who has already subscribed, commented, and supported the channel, I sincerely thank you. Whether it's an encouraging comment, a message about your personal growth, your goals for self-improvement, or even a question about something you're struggling with, I do my best to read and reply to as many of them as I can. I genuinely want to support you and help you progress in any area of your life, so thank you to each one of you. Now let's continue. Chapter 1. The Collapse. The story I'm about to share is about a man named Marcus. Marcus is a 34-year-old entrepreneur who built a tech startup entirely from the ground up. For the last 5 years, he put everything into this business. He sacrificed his relationships, his health, and even his sleep. For a while, it paid off. The company grew. Investors came in. The team expanded. Marcus seemed to be living the dream. But then everything shifted. A larger competitor launched a product that made his own nearly irrelevant. 2 major investors withdrew their support. Team members started leaving. And for the first time, Marcus found himself without direction. He had always been the problem solver, the motivator, the one people relied on. But now, sitting alone in his office at 2 a.m., he realized something unsettling. He didn't know who he was without success. His entire sense of identity had been tied to achievement. And now that he was experiencing failure, everything began to unravel. Anxiety came first, then sleepless nights followed by panic attacks. Within just 2 weeks, Marcus struggled to make even simple decisions. His mind had effectively shut down. The pressure had damaged something within him that he didn't even realize could break. This was when one of his mentors, an investor named James Watanabe, stepped in. James was half Japanese and half American, and had spent several years in Japan training in a traditional dojo. After observing Marcus's situation, he said something Marcus never forgot. "You don't have a business problem. You have a problem of spirit. You built everything on a weak foundation. Now that the pressure has risen, you're seeing there was nothing solid beneath it." At first, Marcus didn't understand. So James explained further. The samurai followed a principle. Their spirit had to be stronger than any external challenge. They called it Hagane no Ishi, the will of steel. And they developed this not through success or daily accomplishments, but through something deeper. Chapter 2. The principle of fire. James brought Marcus to a traditional Kenjutsu dojo, samurai sword training, located in a simple basement space in the middle of the city. The dojo was led by a 70-year-old instructor named Tanaka-sensei, a direct descendant of a samurai lineage. The first thing Tanaka said to Marcus had nothing to do with sword techniques. It was about steel. He asked, "Do you know how steel is made?" while holding an old katana in his hands. He explained that ordinary iron is weak and breaks easily, but when iron is heated to extremely high temperatures combined with carbon, hammered again and again, then cooled and reheated repeatedly, it transforms. It becomes steel, something strong enough to cut through many things without breaking. Then Tanaka pointed at Marcus. Your spirit right now is like iron, soft and vulnerable. The first real pressure bent it. He continued, Bushido is the process of turning iron into steel. But you cannot do that without passing through the fire. Marcus had expected a breathing exercise, meditation, or some mental routine he could simply add to his life. Tanaka laughed. You're still thinking in terms of adding more. Bushido is not about adding. It is about removing everything that is weak until only what is unbreakable is left. Over the next several weeks, Marcus learned that Bushido was not a motivational idea. It was a rigorous process of breaking down and rebuilding one's inner foundation. The first principle Tanaka introduced was called Shin, the principle of the right spirit. And it began with something Marcus had never confronted before, facing what he feared the most. Chapter 3. Facing the Void. What do you fear most? Tanaka asked during their first session. Marcus immediately mentioned losing his business, losing money, disappointing others. Tanaka shook his head. No, those are your surface fears. What is the fear beneath that? Marcus went quiet. The question reached deeper than he expected. Tanaka waited. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5 in complete silence. Eventually Marcus spoke and his voice was unsteady. I'm afraid of being nobody, of being ordinary, of being forgotten. Tanaka nodded. Now we're approaching the real issue. You've spent your entire life trying to outrun this feeling. All the achievements, all the effort, all the ambition were attempts to prove that you are not what you fear. And when the success disappeared, the fear returned because you never confronted it. You only covered it up with accomplishments. The samurai had a practice for this. They called it memento mori, long before the Stoics popularized the idea in the West. Every samurai took time each day to reflect on their own mortality, to face the deepest human fear, the end of existence. When you acknowledge death every day, smaller worries lose their power. Losing money? You will eventually leave this world anyway. Losing status? The same. Failing publicly? Also temporary. When we live with the understanding that our time is limited, we begin to use our days more intentionally. We aim to create something meaningful, not something merely material, but something that lasts across generations. When I speak of doing something extraordinary, I am not saying you must become the next Nikola Tesla, nor am I suggesting that you try to reshape the entire world. The extraordinary achievement being referred to here could simply mean changing the direction of your family's future, becoming someone memorable to your children, your siblings, or your community. You may not transform the entire world, but you can make a real difference for the people closest to you. Tanaka then gave Marcus an exercise that seemed unreasonable at first. Every morning before doing anything else, he was to sit quietly for 20 minutes and visualize his own end in detail. He was to imagine his body stopping, imagine life continuing without him, and accept that everything he created would eventually fade. Marcus initially found the practice upsetting, but Tanaka explained, you see it as depressing because you are resisting it. A samurai does not avoid this reality. He faces it, and when you face death enough times, it no longer controls you. Chapter 4. The Practice of Fire. The first week was mentally exhausting. Each morning Marcus sat down and forced himself to picture the end, and each morning his mind tried to escape it. Thoughts like, this isn't healthy, or you're wasting time, or you should focus on the business kept appearing, but he continued. Then as the second week began, something shifted. The fear started to lose its force, not because he avoided the thought, but because he confronted it directly. And when you look at any fear long enough, its power begins to fade. It stops being something mysterious and overwhelming and becomes something you can understand and manage. The anxiety surrounding the business was still present, but it felt smaller now. Compared to the idea of complete disappearance, losing a company was something he could handle. The samurai understood a key truth about fear. You cannot prevent the feeling of fear, but you can decide whether it guides your actions. A neuroscientist from Stanford University who has studied fear responses for nearly 2 decades discovered something notable. When the brain is repeatedly exposed to a feared situation in a controlled way, the amygdala, the part responsible for fear, reduces its reaction. The brain begins to understand that the fear is not tied to real danger. This is the basic principle behind exposure therapy. But Tanaka didn't stop at the fear of death. He pushed Marcus further. You have faced the idea of physical disappearance. Now face social disappearance. He introduced the second principle of Bushido, Jin, benevolence through strength. However, he explained that true benevolence is not possible while you still depend on approval from others. Samurai were trained from a young age to be unaffected by public opinion. They were taught to act based on internal values rather than external praise or criticism. Not out of arrogance, but because a warrior who depends on approval can be influenced, and a warrior who can be influenced is not strong. Tanaka gave Marcus an exercise that seemed unreasonable at first. Do something publicly embarrassing every week. Not anything offensive or harmful, but something that would intentionally attract judgment. Week 1. Wear completely mismatched clothing in public. Week 2. Sing out loud on a crowded subway. Week 3. Dance alone in a busy public area. Marcus resisted. This is pointless. How does this help with the business? Tanaka responded directly. You still believe your problem is the business. It isn't. Your problem is that you cannot function without the approval of others. You need people to see you as successful, competent, and talented. That dependency weakens you. Because when approval disappears, and it always does, you fall apart. A samurai could lose everything and still remain stable because his identity did not come from anything external. He was the foundation. He was the steel, not the sword, not the armor, not the achievements. Chapter 5. The death of the ego. Marcus completed the first exercise with intense discomfort. He walked outside wearing a bright floral shirt, striped pants that didn't match, and a hat that looked completely out of place. Every stare he received felt like a hit to his ego. His mind kept shouting, "Everyone is judging you. You look foolish. This isn't necessary." But he continued walking, and after about 30 minutes he noticed something. Nothing happened. No one confronted him. No one insulted him. Most people didn't even pay attention. And those who did, well, their opinions had no real impact on his life. The second week he sang on a crowded subway. The embarrassment was even stronger this time. But he realized something important. The discomfort wasn't coming from others, it was coming from him. Most people simply smiled. Some recorded him on their phones. And in the end, he stepped off the train completely fine. The third week, he danced alone in a busy square. For the first time, he didn't feel embarrassed. What he felt was freedom. Not comfort, not pride, just freedom. Freedom from needing approval. Freedom to exist as he was without adjusting himself to be accepted. Freedom to be judged and remain unaffected. The samurai referred to this as mujo, impermanence. Everything is temporary. Approval is temporary. Disapproval is temporary. Success is temporary. Failure is temporary. The only thing that truly lasts is the character you build within yourself. Chapter 6. The steel test. Marcus was starting to understand, but Tanaka wasn't done yet. The third principle of Bushido was the hardest one to practice, gi, doing what is right even when it comes at a cost. Do you know the difference between iron and steel? Tanaka asked, holding the katana. Iron bends under pressure. Steel keeps its shape. He continued. An iron spirit does what's right only when it's easy. A steel spirit does what's right, especially when it's difficult. Tanaka looked straight at Marcus. You have a decision to make in your business, and you've been avoiding it. Marcus felt it. He knew exactly what Tanaka meant. For weeks he'd known what he had to do. Let go of his co-founder, his closest friend since college. His friend wasn't contributing anymore. He lacked motivation and was holding the company back. But Marcus couldn't bring himself to say it. How do you remove someone who helped you build everything from the start? You're choosing emotional comfort over what's right, Tanaka said. That is the behavior of iron. Iron folds when pressure rises. Right now you are bending your values just so you don't feel uncomfortable. Steel does not bargain. Steel follows through on what must be done, no matter the personal difficulty. Until you learn to act that way, you will continue to break under pressure. The samurai had a principle called giri, duty above emotion. This didn't mean being harsh or unkind. It meant that when you clearly understand what the right action is, you take it, even if it feels uncomfortable. If a samurai saw his own leader acting unjustly, He was obligated to confront him, knowing that it could cost him his life, not because it was easy, but because it was the correct thing to do. Marcus spent 3 days struggling with his decision. Every time he tried to call and schedule the conversation, his mind created excuses. Maybe he'll improve. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Maybe I should give it another month. But on the 4th day, he remembered the lesson. Steel does not negotiate. Steel maintains its form under pressure. So he scheduled the meeting. Chapter 7. The conversation no one wants to have. The conversation was one of the hardest moments of Marcus's life. His friend did not take it well. There was anger, there were accusations, and in less than an hour, a 12-year friendship came to an end. Marcus walked out feeling drained, emotionally exhausted, and unsure if he made the right choice. He questioned whether the loss was worth it, but when he returned to the dojo that evening, Tanaka gave him a single knowing nod. "You feel the pain?" he asked. "Good. That means you care. But you still did what needed to be done. That means your spirit is becoming steel. Iron avoids pain. Steel accepts pain as the cost of staying true to its values." Today, Marcus had been forged, and now he understood that he was capable of doing what once felt impossible. The samurai believed that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is acting even while afraid, and integrity is not doing what is right only when it feels comfortable. It is doing what is right even when it tears at you from the inside. This is Hagen no Ishi, the will of steel. It does not mean you don't feel. It means you feel everything, yet still take the right action. Chapter 8. Daily practice. Tanaka understood that single moments of courage don't create an unbreakable spirit. Consistency does. The 4th principle of Bushido was Rei, respect expressed through routine and discipline, and this was the insight Marcus did not expect. Samurai didn't rely on motivation. They relied on structure. "Do you know why we have ceremonies?" Tanaka asked as he prepared tea with calm, steady motions. "Because form creates substance. When you practice the same form correctly every day, you eventually become the form." He explained that samurai woke at the same hour each day and followed the same steps in the same order. They knew discipline could not depend on mood or convenience. Marcus had attempted routines before, but always stopped when he didn't feel like it. Tanaka laughed softly, feeling like it has nothing to do with it. "Do you think a samurai wanted to train at dawn in winter in the cold? They trained because it was the way. And the way does not negotiate with feelings." So Tanaka built a structured practice for Marcus. Not only meditation but a complete sequence, or 30 a.m. Wake up. No negotiations, 15 minutes, visualization, 100 precise wooden sword strikes. A cold shower for 3 full minutes. Breakfast prepared with complete focus. Only after this routine did work begin. "You'll follow this for 100 days straight," Tanaka said. "No exceptions, no negotiations. Sick, traveling, tired, it doesn't matter. The form remains." Marcus tried to argue about balance and flexibility. Tanaka stopped him immediately. "Do you want to be steel or iron? Iron bends, it warps. Steel holds its shape. You've spent 34 years being flexible. How well has that worked for you? Now let's pause for clarification. In many teachings, flexibility is valuable, and we've discussed its importance in several earlier lessons, including one on developing shinobi discipline, where flexibility during adversity is essential. But here the context is different. This is about building a core identity that does not collapse under pressure. When I speak here about not being flexible, I mean the habit of constantly making excuses. The people who delay progress because they are always waiting for the perfect routine, the perfect moment to train, the ideal study method, the right energy, or the right mood. Some negotiate so much with themselves that they never move forward. They remain stuck in a repeating cycle. Here is the truth. There is no perfect moment for anything. There is only the present. While some people are waiting for ideal conditions, others are simply doing the work with what they have. That is what it means to have a will of steel. It is waking up and saying, "I will do what needs to be done regardless of the obstacles." This is exactly what Tanaka wanted Marcus to understand. The first week felt like a mental battle. Every morning at 4:30 a.m. the alarm sounded and Marcus's mind began negotiating. "You only slept 5 hours. You should rest. You can start tomorrow. You deserve a break." The excuses came immediately and convincingly, but that was the real test. One day wouldn't make a noticeable difference. But Marcus reminded himself of the principle of steel. Steel doesn't negotiate, so he put his feet on the floor and moved. The cold shower was difficult in the beginning. His body tensed up before he even stepped in. But he realized something important. The discomfort of the cold lasted only 3 minutes. However, if he avoided it, the discomfort of knowing he broke his routine would stay with him the entire day. On day 7, a small shift occurred. He woke up 2 minutes before the alarm. His body was beginning to adjust. By day 14, the sword strikes that once felt endless now flowed smoothly. His body had internalized the sequence. By day 21, he noticed he wasn't bargaining with himself every morning. He simply got up and followed the routine. The process was becoming automatic. A behavioral researcher at the University of Oxford, who has been studying habit formation for over 15 years, explains, "Discipline isn't something you use up. It's something that gets stronger the more you use it. Once you remove internal negotiation through consistent repetition, you free up a significant amount of mental energy for the rest of your life." The samurai understood this long before science confirmed it. Chapter 9. The Collapse of the System. But on day 32, everything broke. Marcus fell ill with a heavy flu and a fever of 39 degrees C. His body was drained. When the alarm rang at 4:30 a.m., for the first time, he physically couldn't stand without feeling like he might collapse. His mind immediately went to the obvious excuse. You're sick. This is a valid reason to stop. No one would expect you to continue today. Just rest. But then he remembered something Tanaka once said. The real test of steel doesn't happen when everything is going well. It appears when the structure falls apart. Anyone can be disciplined when conditions are easy. Steel remains disciplined when conditions are nearly impossible. Marcus couldn't complete the 100 sword cuts. His body simply couldn't manage it. But he did manage 10 cuts while sitting on the edge of his bed. He couldn't handle a full 3-minute cold shower. But he did wash his face with cold water. He couldn't sit for a 15-minute meditation. But he did give himself 3 minutes. The routine wasn't abandoned. It was adjusted. And that made all the difference. The danger isn't in modifying the practice. The danger is using modification as a justification to quit. Once you allow a complete break, your mind learns that stopping is acceptable, and soon stopping becomes the default. The samurai had a clear rule. Practice never stops. You may adapt it, but you never eliminate it. If you allow a full exception, you're no longer following Bushido. You're following convenience. In a recent story on the channel about the young shinobi, we covered this same lesson. Understanding it can shift everything. I know people who live in all-or-nothing mode. If it isn't perfect, they'd rather not do it at all. But understand this. Perfection does not exist. While some wait for perfect conditions, someone else, maybe less talented, maybe less knowledgeable, is simply taking action. And execution always wins. So keep this principle in mind and apply it consistently. 1 is always greater than 0. On the days when you cannot study for 2 hours, study for 1. If you cannot train for an hour, train for 30 minutes. But never allow the result to be 0. This applies to all areas of life. Chapter 10. The inner storm. By day 50, Marcus faced a different challenge. His business began to recover. A new investor showed interest. The remaining team was performing well. Things finally seemed to be improving, and almost immediately his mind began to suggest, you don't need this strict discipline anymore. You've already proven yourself. It's okay to slow down. This is what Tanaka called the poison of success, more dangerous than failure because it arrives disguised as comfort. Failure is clear. It forces change. But success is deceptive. It convinces you to return to old patterns because you believe you've earned rest. Samurai understood that victory was actually the most dangerous moment, because that's when one stops sharpening the blade, and a blade that is not maintained will eventually become dull. Marcus nearly fell into this trap. For 3 days he thought about easing the routine, waking up at 6 a.m., skipping the sword practice, returning to warm showers. But then he remembered why he started. it was never just about saving the business. It was about developing a mindset that stayed steady no matter what was happening on the outside. Whether the business improved or failed didn't change the purpose of the practice. The discipline stood on its own, separate from any outcome. This is Haganah, the idea that real strength of will does not rely on success or failure. It remains the same regardless of circumstances. Chapter 11. The moment of truth, day 73, arrived, bringing Marcus his hardest challenge yet. The investor who had shown interest suddenly pulled away. Another team member quit. And then came the call. His father had been admitted to the hospital with a serious heart condition. Marcus had to leave right away, traveling to another state. There would be no structure, no familiar environment, nothing he had relied on for the past 2 months. His mind immediately presented the obvious reasoning. You can't keep up the practice now. This is serious. Your family needs you. Just pause everything. You can always start again later. But Marcus wasn't the same person anymore. He no longer argued with himself. He didn't try to justify or debate. In the hospital hallway while his father was in surgery, Marcus quietly moved his hands through each motion of his training, making the cuts in the air, focusing with complete attention. No audience, no equipment, no schedule, just commitment. In the hospital bathroom, he splashed cold tap water onto his face for 3 minutes. It wasn't perfect, but it was consistent. And for the first time, Marcus truly understood what Tanaka had been trying to explain. Practice does not adjust to circumstances. Circumstances adjust to practice. A samurai does not train only for the day of battle. He trains because he is a samurai. The battle itself is secondary. Identity is permanent. Chapter 12. The quiet transformation, day 100, arrived without celebration. No dramatic moment. Marcus simply woke up at 4:30 a.m., completed his routine, and continued with his day. But something was different. He was not the same person who had stepped into the dojo 100 days earlier. The business still had difficulties, but Marcus no longer collapsed under pressure. When challenges appeared, he addressed them directly. No emotional reaction, no panic, just action. Tanaka invited Marcus for one final conversation in the dojo. You have finished your first 100-day cycle. Do you understand what Haganah no means now? Marcus paused before responding. It's not about avoiding emotion. It's about acting correctly even when emotions are present. Tanaka nodded slightly. Partially correct. But there's more. He lifted the katana again. Do you know how long it takes to forge a real katana? The blacksmith heats the steel, hammers it, folds it, reheats it, and hammers again repeatedly. Why? Because each cycle removes impurities. At the beginning, the steel contains weaknesses, air pockets, excess carbon, irregularities in structure. But each cycle of heating and hammering removes more weaknesses, until eventually nothing fragile remains, only solid, reliable steel. He looked at Marcus. These 100 days did not make you stronger. They removed what was weak, your fear of failure, reduced by facing it daily, your need for others' approval, weakened by steady discipline, your habit of avoiding discomfort, dissolved through consistent, non-negotiable practice. You did not create a new spirit. You uncovered the one that was already there, beneath all the unnecessary layers. Chapter 13. The Real Meaning. Hagen no Ishi is not about becoming someone different, Tanaka continued. It is about removing everything that is not truly you, until only the essential remains. And the essential part of you is resilient. Samurai were not extraordinary beings. They were ordinary humans who removed what was unnecessary. Excess fear, a fragile sense of self, and dependence on external outcomes. What remains is something that cannot be broken, because nothing breakable is left. Marcus absorbed the meaning of those words. He had spent his whole life trying to become more successful, more respected, stronger. But Bushido was not about adding. It was about reducing. Not about becoming more, but about becoming less fearful, less dependent, less fragile. So what do I do now? Marcus asked. Tanaka gave a slight smile. Now you continue. Hagen no Ishi is not a final point. It is an ongoing practice. You never completely finish removing weaknesses. There will always be another layer, more refinement, more work. But now you know you are capable. You have already proven to yourself over 100 days. that you can face difficulty and continue forward. That sense of certainty changes everything. A clinical psychologist from Yale University, who has spent 2 decades studying resilience, found something interesting. Real confidence doesn't come from repeating positive affirmations or imagining success. It comes from real proof that you can endure difficulty. Each time you face something hard and get through it, your mind records a simple message: I can handle this. When repeated over time, this becomes a solid, unshakable belief. You might expect that this is where the story turns into a perfect ending. But that's not what happened. 6 months later, Marcus's business failed completely. The investment never came through. His team left. He had to shut everything down. And for the first time, he remained steady. Not joyful, not relieved, but stable. He lost the business, but he didn't lose himself. Because his identity wasn't tied to the business. He was the steel, not the blade, not the armor, not the success. The steel, and steel does not break. 3 weeks later, he started a new project. No emotional chaos, no overthinking, just clear and consistent effort. The routine continued. The visualization, the training, the cold water, the tea. Not to rescue the new project, but because this was simply who he had become. People began to notice. They asked him, "How are you so calm after losing everything? How did you not fall apart?" His answer was straightforward. "I was forged." There's a truth about Heigen no Ishi. The process never really ends. You never reach a point where you can claim you're completely unbreakable, because life will always present new challenges. The difference now is that you know you can face those challenges and remain whole. And that knowledge changes how you move through life. People can feel it. It isn't arrogance. It's stability. It's something deeper. It's the presence of someone who cannot be easily disturbed because they've been tested enough times to know they can withstand whatever comes. This doesn't mean you stop feeling emotion. It means emotion no longer dictates your actions. And when you reach that point, you become the person others look at and wonder, how does this person stay steady? The answer is simple. They have already been broken and rebuilt again and again in the process of becoming unbreakable. So the real question is, do you actually want to be forged? Because Hagana no Ishi isn't for people who want fast change. It isn't for those looking for a simple 5-minute trick to improve their life. It's for those who understand that meaningful transformation requires removing what is weak. It requires letting go of every excuse, every shortcut, and every internal negotiation that holds you back. The process is demanding. It will ask you to get up when your entire body wants to rest. It will push you to confront fears you've avoided for years. It will require doing what is right even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. But the result is different. You emerge as something stronger. You become steel. And steel does not break. The samurai committed themselves to this for generations because they understood something essential. In a world filled with uncertainty, chaos, and unavoidable hardship, the only thing you can reliably shape is the strength of your own character. You can't control whether your business succeeds. You can't control how others treat you. You can't control every outcome life brings, but you can control whether you stand back up and whether you continue forward. This is Bushido. This is Hagana no Ishi. This is what it means to have a steady will and a spirit that does not break. If this video brought value to you in any way, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Remember, you don't need more motivation. You need fewer weaknesses. And the only way to remove weaknesses is by facing the challenges that expose them. If you've made it to this point, you've already taken an important first step. Many people never even reach this stage, but watching is the easy part. The real challenge is applying these principles in your daily life. Begin with small steps, but do not stop. Thank you for your time. See you in the next video.